Zimbabwe's growing exile community in nearby South Africa is struggling to cope with many issues: bureaucratic hassles, losing their rights back home, and a lack of opportunities in their new country are leaving many frustrated. VOA's Nico Colombant has that story.
Hundreds of Zimbabweans wait inside the compound of South Africa's Department of Home Affairs in an attempt to get or renew their asylum papers. Once they are inside the compound in Pretoria, they are trapped for hours under the baking sun, hoping to get an appointment. Samuel Bongo feels lucky because he finally got his papers renewed.
Zimbabwe still,
He says he left neighboring Zimbabwe because he could not feed his family anymore, as inflation and political violence became unbearable. Austin Mavura explains it took 3 weeks for him to get his own asylum papers. He tries to get by in South Africa by selling cookies to other Zimbabweans waiting in line. Many Zimbabweans say in addition to the bureaucratic hassles, they face discrimination in most public places and the constant threat of anti-immigrant violence. At human rights offices in Pretoria, Zimbabwean lawyer Gabriel Shumba says it is not just in South Africa where his fellow nationals feel at a loss. He feels frustrated exiled Zimbabweans cannot more easily help improve the situation in their own country.
The deliberate sidelining or disenfranchisement of people who have been forced to flee their country, in particular from national processes, such as the constitutional reform exercise, such as even elections.
Other exiled Zimbabweans are concerned about bare survival. Unemployed, homeless, and hungry, they have found refuge at the Central Methodist Church in downtown Johannesburg. Offices here have been converted into cramped quarters where families huddle together and also prepare their meals. Children try to do their homework. The church's lobby has been converted into a market and also a place to dry laundry. One of the jobless living here, Isaac Matanda, was a local government administrator in Zimbabwe. He fled Zimbabwe by foot last year because he feared for his life due to his opposition political activities.
Things haven't been so comfortable to date because I'm still in search. Despite that, I've got high qualifications. I'm trying to run around.
At night, before bedtime, exiled Zimbabweans come together to sing, dance, and pray for better days. The man behind the church's generosity is Bishop Paul Varon.
We deal with almost every possible human difficulty that you possibly can. You know, there are relationship problems, there's violence, there's sometimes alcohol is a problem in the building. It's not smooth sailing, and there aren't easy and quick answers.
Bishop Varon gives nightly sermons, during which he also advertises available jobs in South Africa he hears about. The services are well attended. Zimbabwean exiles say they are having a moment of reprieve in turbulent and desolate times away from home. At the end of the service, when the bishop asks who wants special prayers and a sprinkle with holy water, dozens of adults rush forward with their children, hoping they will have a better life eventually, wherever that may be. Nico Colombant, VOA News, Johannesburg.
Now, to discuss this issue further, we're joined by Blessing Zulu of VOA's Zimbabwe Service, where he's co-host and reporter of the daily radio program Studio 7 and Live Talk. Blessing, thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ndimyake.
Now, you were in South Africa just recently. Tell us, if you could, about the anxiety that you heard many of the Zimbabweans there are facing, at least especially ahead of this July 31st deadline, where most of those who are undocumented are going to be deported back to Zimbabwe.
It's really a desperate situation for most Zimbabweans because the majority could not get those papers as required by Pretoria for a variety of reasons. Some did not have documents like passports, and the Zimbabwe government was tasked to do that. It failed to deliver. So only a fraction did manage to get the papers, and for most of them who are in exile, who are fearing for their lives, they are saying the situation is really bad.
Mm-hmm. Now, South Africa had in the past extended the deadline of the deportations. Is there any possibility of it being extended? I understand there's still a lot more who were not able to register or get their documentation.
From talking to South African officials, they are saying that they've given Zimbabweans enough time to register because they also have to deal with other cases. Remember, according to the United Nations Human Rights Agency that deals with refugees, South Africa is the country in the world with the highest number of asylum seekers. Out of about 875,000 people who were seeking asylum last year, South Africa accounted for 1/5 of that, followed, of course, by the United States of America. So they are saying this deadline is not going to be moved because they have to deal with other cases. There are some people coming from as far as Somalia, for example, and other parts of Africa. So it's really a desperate situation for South Africa.
And of course, this influx of Zimbabweans and other populations in South Africa has led to a lot of reported incidents of xenophobic attacks. A lot of Zimbabweans in particular have been beaten and harassed, being accused of taking up the country's resources, being violent, etc. Why, say in the example that was given in the package we just ran with Isaac Matanga, who are qualified, why do they still want to be there despite these kind of hardships?
I think the situation in Zimbabwe is not yet conducive, and of course, the South African president, Mr. Zuma, is the SADC-appointed mediator who is trying to bring order to Zimbabwe, which is, of course, the region's sick man. So as long as the situation is bad in Zimbabwe, I think people will continue to flock to South Africa. But like you pointed out, there is the problem of the xenophobic attacks. Because if you look at South Africa's unemployment, it's about 25%. And they blame it on foreigners like Zimbabweans saying they are coming to take their jobs. So that creates a lot of tension.
Well, let's focus then now on what is going on in Zimbabwe. There are these talks of elections. ZANU-PF and President Mugabe are pushing for them to be held this year. And the party that it is co-sharing the government with, the Movement for Democratic Change, says the country is not ready. Together with President Zuma, as you just mentioned, they want the elections to be held next year. What's the status right now?
I think like the ZANU-PF Supreme Decision-Making Body, the Politburo last week, said they want elections to be held this year. Of course, South Africa is saying that is dead on arrival. It's not going to happen. But you see, in the past, President Robert Mugabe has been known to push his way through. You know, even if his regional counterparts have been against holding elections that are violent and all that kind of stuff, yes. We have seen that he always has his way. So that talk of election, I think, also causes a lot of problems. And once you talk of elections in Zimbabwe, people think of violence, and more and more people again cross the border into Botswana and South Africa.
Now, if these elections do happen, which seem unlikely this year, considering even yesterday, just the Zimbabwe Election Commission chairman said there's no money to carry out elections. We know that the constitution-making process is still being formulated, is still underway. But say elections do happen, what is the expectation of many Zimbabweans, and including those who are in South Africa, who are obviously wanting to return home? I
think for most, they see holding elections this year as a disaster, and we are likely to come up with another government of national unity because Mr. Tsvangirai, Morgan Tsvangirai, who is the Prime Minister and the leader of the ruling Movement for Democratic Change, has also indicated that if elections are held this year without the key changes that he and the region are demanding, he's not going to take part in those elections. So already there, you are likely to have a one-man race, and it's going to create problems for Mr. Mugabe. Well,
I guess we'll just keep an eye on the developments in Zimbabwe. Thank you so much. Blessing Zulu is a co-host and reporter of VOA's Zimbabwe Service, Studio 7, and Live Talk, broadcasting every day to Zimbabwe.